only got massive protests from Palestinians in Amman, but also from Jordanians who don't often protest. There's Christians protesting in the south, and obviously Bedouin tribes protesting along the border. We're also seeing mass protests in Cairo, Morocco, and more widely across the region. So tonight is going to be a very timely and very important meeting, not just focusing on Palestine, but also the Middle East more generally. We're going to hear from each speaker, and then there will be time for discussion and questions, so get thinking now if you want to contribute. And then at the end we'll come back, make a few announcements, and we'll see you all tomorrow at the national demonstration. So first, we're going to hear from Tariq Ali, who again probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but is a long-time activist, expert I suppose, on all things left.
Friends, before actually discussing the current situation in Palestine, I think it's important from this platform to express our solidarity with all those Palestinian demonstrators who have been marching in the West Bank, who have been attacked by the repressive forces of the Palestinian Authority, which is a disgrace, and who have made clear that in any free elections in the Palestinian territories, occupied, unoccupied, the organizations that would win are those who are waging the struggle. And those who have recommenced in a dramatic way the resistance to the Israeli occupation. I think it's very important to say that, because people imagine, or people in the West, not just the politicians and the media, but many people who depend on the media for their news, that the Israelis can carry on killing people endlessly, as they have been doing for the last decades, 3, 4, 5 decades, more, targeting children, bombing from the skies, destroying houses, and that nothing will happen. Because their own politicians and elected leaders in the United States and the European Union don't want anything to happen. People think, well, maybe they know better. Nothing will happen, but something always happens. Always. Sooner or later, something triggers off a reaction. And then everything is up for grabs again. Now, I am one of those who have always supported the Palestinian resistance as a whole. I'm not a member or a supporter of Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. The people I feel very sympathetic to are Barghouti's group, the Palestine Initiative, who launched the BDS, and work with them when I asked to do so. So what we are seeing today for the second time this century is the populations of the world saying to their rulers, especially in the West, we deny you our consent, first, to wage war on Iraq, those huge demonstrations, and we now know with Jack Straw, then Foreign Secretary, admitting today we were wrong. The Iraq war was a huge error. And the papers coming out say that Jeff Hoon, who was then Defense Minister, had actually said to the Americans that given the scale of the opposition in Britain, this was one day after the demonstration, it's possible we might not be able to join you. And Bush sent a note to Blair saying, I know you're in trouble. Your people oppose this war. Even he could see that. And we don't mind if you don't come. We can manage it alone. The Americans told them that, but they went in. And today we are seeing this on the streets again. This is why people who should know better, who says, oh, demonstrations don't help, they don't do anything, completely and utterly wrong. Because at a time when the politicians are paralyzed for whatever reasons, that the politicians don't do anything, the only people who can take political initiatives and say what needs to be said are those who come out marching on the streets. They came out for Iraq in a huge way, and they're coming out for Palestine now. And even if nothing happens immediately after these demonstrations, it creates a new level of political consciousness which says we are right, or we were right, and our politicians, elected politicians, wrong. And I say to you, I don't care if Labour's won these two by-elections with a huge majority, it was expected. But the people who were voting were voting to get rid of the Tories, not to support Labour's policies either at home or abroad. Now, the other thing worth noticing and noting is that despite the total hysteria, to say that this was just an act by a small terrorist organization, i.e. the elected government of Gaza, the Hamas government, that they've done all this and horror, atrocity. No one supports atrocities. Most people at Hamas don't. We still are not sure who did it or who ordered it. But to try and use that to hide the entire past of the oppression and occupation that has been visited on the Palestinians from 1948 onwards is unacceptable. And the people, the new generations in Palestine are saying, we're going to fight. If we die, we die. They're incredibly courageous people. If we die, we die, but we're not going to sit down and do nothing anymore. And that is why you see the anger throughout Palestine. You see the anger in Jordan, where there is a huge Palestinian population. 500,000 people came out the day after the king, unelected, apologist and creation of the West, said he refused to meet Biden. He said, I will not meet Biden. The next day there were 500,000 people out on the streets. They couldn't take the Israeli embassy. In Turkey, a member of NATO, there were hundreds of thousands of people out in Istanbul and other towns. And actually they did begin the burning of the Israeli embassy, but was stopped before it went under. The president of Colombia expelled the Israeli ambassador. The Latin Americans have always been good on this question, much better than the Europeans. Chavez did it, Morales did it, Chile did it. The Palestinian population in Chile is quite high. So it's become a global movement suddenly, which is why it's not going to be easy to have any more cover-ups when the politicians start telling lies. I mean, what do they think their citizens are? Kindergarten children? Even they wouldn't be taken in by this absurd lie that the Palestinians bombed their own hospital. And it's taken up in the media, it's shown on the television news. Biden gives its support by saying, I think it was their own team that did it, not our team. I mean, this guy is honestly approaching a level of dementia now. which needs to be dealt with, and which is very dangerous for the world. They should just remove him and put his vice president. She's not that good, or any good, but at least she's not lost it. I mean, the other day he said this. Yesterday he said, I was born in Israel myself. Well, even the American press had to say this is not true. This is the place where he was actually born. So we are in a very, very strange state. And the attempt to demonize the Palestinian resistance, thanks to our marches, our demonstration, the resistance of the Palestinian itself has failed completely. Now, the interesting thing is this, that this is beginning to create divisions in Europe itself. A leading Spanish government minister has demanded that the Spanish government, which is a coalition, breaks off with Israel, unheard of in the EU. She has said that Netanyahu is a war criminal and should be brought to the International Criminal Court at The Hague, which shouldn't just be there for trying the enemies of the West, but should be there for trying war crimes when they are committed. Of course, that's never going to happen, but it should happen. And the politicians in this country now changing their minds, who supported the cutting off of electricity, water, food supplies to Gaza, like this imbecile Starmer, are now retreating. No, we never meant that. We were misunderstood. You can see the tapes of what he said and what was parroted by the Labour front bench. From the Tories, one expects nothing. And from Labour, too, I have to say, one expects hardly anything. They go along with the United States and what it does. And that's the last point I want to make, because I don't need to convince you about the justice of the Palestinian cause. That the notion that Israel, a country of 5 million Jews, largely Jewish people, could do something which it has been doing, on the scale on which it's been doing, without the total 100% backing of the United States is impossible. It was the backing of the United States, and increasingly, more and more, they've got worse, the European powers, that allows it to keep going. And the Israeli journalist Gideon Levy, attending a United States National Press Club meeting, very prestigious meeting, said to the Americans, the task of a friend is to tell your other friend who you're talking to the truth, whereas what you people do is just encourage the lies and fantasies of the people in Israel. And he said, I'm very pessimistic about Israel, because he said, I barely meet people who regard the Palestinians as human beings. This he's addressing Americans, and it's getting publicity. And he said, I had to wait as a Jew, a Jewish journalist, 40 minutes before I could get an ambulance going. And the ambulance was stopped because there was a Palestinian old man in it. And when I said to the young soldiers, Israeli soldiers, guarding the ambulance, wouldn't you be ashamed if it was your father? They said, why do you talk like that? Our father? They're Jews, they're not Palestinians. I.e. the racism, the chosen race mythologies have just reached a point where a large number of young Jewish Americans came out and occupied the House of Representatives saying, we are Jews who support Palestine, we want an immediate ceasefire. So it's thrilling, and it's making it nervous. very quickly, and then I'll finish. What is likely to happen now? In my opinion, what is likely to happen is that it will be resisted, and it's very dangerous. But the Israelis are trying to chuck out 1 million Palestinians from Gaza, trying to get the Egyptians to take some, the Jordanians to take some, and so far the Jordanians have said no. They are already in their homeland. And the Egyptians, will see how much money Sisi wants to take, 400,000, 500,000. With him, it's always money. It's the politics of the bazaar. How much will you give me if I do your bidding this time? So the plan of the Israelis, backed by the United States, is to destroy half of Gaza, cut its population down by 1 million, i.e. genocidal in the scientific meaning of the word, and then see if they can control them better. And they'll be backed by these creepy politicians we have from both parties in this country. They'll be backed by other European governments. They'll be backed by the United States. And if this happens, I think it will enlarge the conflict. It will be difficult, in my opinion, I may be wrong, for Hezbollah to stay out. There will be more pressure in Egypt, and who knows where that will lead this time. Because if Egypt erupts, that, quite honestly, if it's not the end, it's close to the end for this type of behavior by the American-Israeli alliance. So we fight on. Oh, that's all we can do. We write, we speak, we go on marches and demonstrations. That's the only thing we can do for the Palestinian people today and other oppressed peoples. And we've been doing it for a long time, and we'll carry on doing it. So I hope the march tomorrow is really big.
Thank you, Tariq. That's really loud. We'll hear from Garda Kami next.